back everyone to the second video of this series on how to migrate to Jmix 2. In this case, we will actually start looking at the, I call it infrastructure project migration. So it's basically about setting up your project to contain all the configuration files for the new version of Jmix and the new version of Vaadin. So we are going to start with this approach here. So we'll have an existing Rent Your Stuff application 1.5. So this is actually prep work that I did for upgrading from 1.2 to 1.5. There were a couple of smaller things that I did. You can read it through in the GitHub commit history if you want. So there are two commits about first upgrading to Jmix 1.5.5, and then there's another commit about the removal of those custom assertions that I used for SRJ. This was mainly the case because I saw that this plugin that we were using for Gradle is not really maintained anymore, and the value add was not really present. So I just switched to the previous approach of just using SRJ as is. And yeah, this is basically the first app. I have opened 3 IntelliJ projects. This is the first one where we can just look up stuff later on how it was before. Then we have one IntelliJ project, Rent Your Stuff 2.x, and this is just a branch of the existing repository, but in another IntelliJ project. And then we have an additional empty 2.x Jmix application where I used the same name. I called it also Rent Your Stuff, but it's just for copying and pasting the generated files that come out of the box from Jmix 2.2. So with that, I think we can start. On the left side, you see this is now the empty application where we put all the stuff into, and this is on a branch Jmix 2.2, but it is still the existing. So right now it's still the existing application in the version 1.5.5, and this is what we now have to upgrade. And on the right side here, you can see this empty application where we will basically, copy over stuff from, and I will go through it one by one. There's also the ability to use the Jmix mechanism to upgrade, which will do some of the stuff automatically, but I think for educational purposes it might be better if we just go through each of the files or the directories. So starting at the very top, we have here this front-end directory, and if you look at it, it contains mainly custom CSS definitions that you might want to include. This is basically, in Jmix 1.x or in Vaadin 8, it was under the themes directory somewhere in the source path. So now we have it here under frontend, and it's also possible to create custom TypeScript components and so on into this directory. So since we don't have that here, I will just basically copy and paste as is and add that to Git. So this is the first thing that comes from Vaadin 24. This Gradle directory here and the idea directory, there's no changes. This is just temporary directories, but we have here the Gradle directory without the dot, which contains the Gradle wrapper. And as you can see here, there's this Gradle version 8.6, and if we go here to the Gradle version properties, we can see it contains version 7.6. So in this case, I will also just copy over the whole directory and override everything that was there. Okay, so then the next thing is this infrastructure directory on our side, which we use Terraform for deploying to Heroku. This doesn't change, so we can just keep it there. So then we can probably go through before we go to the source directory, we can go to the different files here. So first of all, let's use the gitignore file. And here what I will do, I will just copy the content over and then go into this existing git ignore and just say compare with clipboard so that we have an easier time to understand what's the actual difference. And in this case, this is clipboard means that it comes from the new version and this is the old version. And I will just take over everything that I potentially want. So as you can see here, there's now source main bundles, which is something that we want to ignore. Okay, we can just take this over. And there are a couple of things from Vaadin that are related to Vaadin 24. So we'll just take over those. And then it also contains this DS store file from macOS, so we can also just get rid of this existing one here. And additionally, we want to have this target directory now also be included or basically excluded from Git. So with that, it should be updated. So let's do the same thing for the Gradle file. So the build.gradle file, which actually contains all the project configurations on how the project is built and so on. And here we can go once again one by one. So as you can see here, clipboard is the new version and the build Gradle file, the existing one, is the old version. So first of all, we have an updated plugin, Gradle plugin for Jmix, which is 2.2.1.1. Previously it was 1.5.5, so we'll take this over. Second new thing is that we have now an additional plugin that we need from Vaadin. So let's just take this. Here we can get rid of this empty line. Then we have the Jmix version, which is like the framework version, which is actually updated to 2.2.1. So we'll also take this over. And the next thing is just a slight DSL change. So here it was URL equals and now it's gone. Okay, I'm not sure that there's a difference, but let's just take it. Shouldn't harm. The interesting part now comes with the dependencies that are changing. What you can see here is the old dependencies from the Jmix UI, like Vaadin 8, mainly contain like the suffix -ui. And there were like a couple for data, themes, widgets, so on and so forth, and also for the different other modules like security or multi-tenancy, you always had this UI suffix here. And this now changes. And instead, so first of all, this is why we can get rid of those, right? So let's just take over the empty line here and remove them. And instead, we will take over the security flow UI instead of UI, okay? And then additionally, we need the flow UI itself. So this is this Jmix flow UI starter. And then we have another one for the data starter and the themes. And then one additional change is that in Jmix 2, there is now this data tools as a dedicated add-on instead of being part of the core. So this is why we have now new dependencies to data tools and to data tools flow UI. So I will just take over all of those manually here now because I do not want to override the multi-tenancy add-on. So now the only thing that we have additionally compared to the empty application is this multi-tenancy. And the only difference that we need to do here is also call it flow UI, and you can read it up in the documentation of this add-on, that this is the new dependency. Okay, so with that, actually we are fine. And then there are a couple of other things. So first of all, in the empty application, I just didn't configure Postgres, so this is why it's called out for HSQLDB. We can just keep it here because here we use Postgres. And the other thing is that there's a test implementation dependency to Flow UI Test Assist, and previously it was just Test Assist. So let me just take this over here again and replace it. And then we have our dependency to Postgres and our test dependency to HSQL for UI integration test, and then a couple of Lombok and Mapstruct dependencies, which we probably could also at some point update the versions, but we don't necessarily need to. Good, so then we are already almost through. The last one is that Vaadin 24 requires, or the Jmix 2 with Vaadin 24 requires to have this additional setting here that we do not optimize the bundle. There was an explanation in the Jmix documentation at some point. I think it came in 2.1 that is actually required to have it like this. Okay, and with that, we now updated our Gradle file. And if we now go back to what is left, so we have the Gradle wrapper file. This is just yeah, basically just this definition on how to run Gradle. We can just take that over, so I'm not sure if there's some change or whatever, but since we just upgraded to latest Gradle anyways, we will also just take over those. And apparently there are some changes, because otherwise IntelliJ wouldn't tell us that it's like, or mark it as blue. Good. So then the other last thing is this is the Jmix Studio is just an XML file for the definition of what Studio needs in order to work correctly. And then we have this IntelliJ file. I will also not pick this. And the settings Gradle, if you look at it, it's actually the same thing as we used to have. And system properties is one file that we used for Heroku, so this is also not needed. So with that, except for the source directory, we have already updated all the files to the latest version. So what I will do next is I will go to the Gradle section here in IntelliJ and hit refresh, so that it will actually start downloading the new dependencies and trying to build the application. Of course, this will not work if I now would go here to build and build actually the application. Then it would actually create problems, because now we haven't changed our source code. So if we go, for example, to the user entity, then now we have the situation that this Java X namespace is not present anymore, and this is because we now use Jmix 2.2, which uses Spring Boot 3, and this is why we don't have those annotations, those namespaces anymore. And instead, what we have to do is we have to switch it to Jakarta namespace. So before we do that, let's actually go through the source code one by one, and I will start here with the main source code, and we can take a look at the user class, and then we can compare it to our user class and what's the difference, and then we can see it one by one again. So this is the old stuff, and this is the new version as it was generated. What you can see here in the new version, it uses now Jakarta persistence instead of JavaX persistence. This is the dependency that change that I just mentioned. So we can just take this over as is. And then additionally, we used the multi-tenancy add-on. So this is why we have implemented this interface accepts tenant. And so this is why we also will want to keep this here, assuming that multi-tenancy add-on itself didn't really change. So this explains this difference, and then we have the getter and setter for the different attributes. And let's see what, okay, so those final statements here, they are just, changed in the way how Studio generates source code, where by default now all variables are final. This is something that we can, we can take it over or we can leave it, doesn't really matter. In our case, doesn't really make a huge difference. And this is where those changes are coming from. So with that, I think the user class is fine. And now you can see the Jakarta namespace actually properly resolved from IntelliJ, so everything is now correctly understood. And the next thing is the security section. And here we have our database repository, which I would assume would not change, but we can double check that as well. And yeah, there are only the final statements, which I don't really care for now. But what we do need to care is those two files, because they change slightly. If we go here to the full access role, for example, and compare that, then you can see that the imports changed. So first of all, it's now security flow UI instead of security UI, and then you also have different annotations. So what was previously called screen is now in Vaadin 24 called view. So this is why basically everywhere where you use the terminology of screens, in your application, this is now has to be replaced with this name of view. So let's take those over as well. And then the other thing is this UI minimal role, which is now, I think since 1.5, generated directly into the projects. So, previously it was just in the Jmix source code itself, and now it's part of our application source code. So I can just take this over, and it should not really do any any problem. What we can see here now is that this view does not yet exist. That is here referenced, and this is our next section. So if we go to view, you can see that there are like 3 views for the login, for the main screen, or for the main view now as it is called, and the user CRUD screens. Since in our application, the Rent Your Stuff, we have this very same thing. So we have those 3 classes, but they are just called user browse and user edit. So I will just take them over as is and copy the whole view directory here. And this is possible mainly because I did not change anything in those screens, right? So previously we didn't do any kind of customization or whatever. So this is why I now just copied over the blank new generated stuff, and I can just get rid of the screens directory here. So then the last thing in the main source code is this Rent Your Stuff application. So let's quickly compare that as well. And there are like a couple of annotation differences. So mainly those 3, push, theme, and PWA, which is like new annotations that come from Vardin Flow, which is actually Vardin 24. So I'll just take them over. And also the usage, and since I use the very same name for this empty application, now all the references to the name are actually still fine. And then additionally, we now implement this, or the application class needs to implement this app shell configurator. So let's do that as well. And if we scroll down slightly, then we can see those 2 final statements here. And then one additional thing is that previously I used this constructor binding for those properties file, and in Spring Boot 3 they improved slightly the way how property files are actually automatically understood. So we don't need to do that anymore. So instead what we can now do is just get rid of this bean definition here, and instead of using this constructor binding, we will use this configuration properties annotation. And this should theoretically already do the trick. So we don't need this validation anymore. So let's see if there's, right now it still says it's not registered via enable configuration properties. So in order to make it be 100% sure that we have it available, we can do like this and make it explicit that we want to have this properties file interpreted. And this properties file is just for taking custom definitions here from application properties into our source code so that we can use it. Okay, so with that we now have everything in the source directory, in the main directory, and then we have the resources directory here that we also need to take a small look at. So let's quickly do this as well. So first of all, we can compare the application properties file and this. If we see that there are like also a couple of changes here, in this case we use Postgres now. In this empty application it used HSQLDB, so we don't need to take this over, but instead here once again we have like name change from screen to view, and then also like that it's called login view instead of login screen. So we'll take this over. Then we will also take this information over, which is the default database credentials, or that are used for pre-filling the login screen. And then we have a couple of Vardin 24 settings, And additionally, we have those log statements. So I will just take them over as well here manually to not lose my currency setting. Good, and then if we go to the view section here, this is just the corresponding thing on the Java class that we've seen before. So I will also take those over as they are and instead get rid of those 3 default screens. So with that, we should have those custom screens or like generated screens for us working. And the next thing is that we have this menu XML, and here you can see there are of course slight differences because in the old application we already had a lot of menu items, but also like it changed from caption to title. In this case, since I will basically remove all the screens now and rebuild them from one by one, because this is the easiest way in my case to do it, I will also just take over the complete new menu, basically the empty menu. And here we also switch the namespace. So let's just take this over as well. And then additionally, we have this message properties. And of course, here we have the same situation. We have a lot of custom stuff already in there. The definition of the order lines and so on. So I will go through that now one by one as well, and basically take over everything that seems to be valid. So this is this new, or like it's just reordered because we have it here at this line as well. So I'll just get rid of this line. Then we have a new information about username, which was just previously slightly below. So let's do like this. So we have ID, username, and then we have, I'm just trying to make it visually more easy to see what's the difference. Now we have username, first name, then we have everything's the same, and then we have active. So let's take this slightly below. So now it should be the same. And then we have a couple of translations for the default screens, right? For screen and then user. And this is where we will take over, first of all, those things here about the main view. So let me just search for those. Those should be gone now. And here we have this screen.login, which will also get take over from the new one. And then we have the screen.user, which we can also remove. And then we have all the our custom translations for the different entities, and this I will actually keep. So let's just take over this rest and put it here. And assuming I did not do anything wrong now, then it should actually be fine. Okay, so with that we are almost done. There's one thing here in this meta-inf directory which we also need to include. It sits directly under the resources, so I will just take this over as well. And then of course we have, like in the test sources, we now also have a couple of changes. First of all, because of different imports regarding Vaadin 24 and also the Jakarta stuff and so on. So I will probably for now just skip that and don't really care about it at this very moment. And now if I hit build project, then I most likely will have a couple of compiler errors that are not resolving anymore. So those things we will cover in the next video. So I just wanted to go through mainly the configuration files, which I've now done. And then I will basically commit this stuff. And in the next video, then we are going to talk about basically, migrating all the entities, removing all the screens so that we can come to a point where we have like, first of all, the project builds again, and second of all, we can run our integration tests that are not UI integration tests, and then we will basically have a running empty application again that we can then in the following videos just improve regarding the UI. Okay, thank you for watching, and then see you next time.